Chapter 12. Tristan fidgeted in his seat as the woman singing on stage belted out some ungodly note. How the hell do people actually enjoy this crap? He thought to himself. Light flooded into the balcony directly across from him as the door opened. It was the booth right next to Silas's booth. Tristan could see Clint in the doorway. He jumped out of his seat and began waving his arms, trying to get Clint's attention, but the door shut a second later. Tristan stopped jumping and looked around. The people that shared the booth with him were all staring, irritation painted in different levels on each person's face. "Sorry," Tristan said, adjusting the ascot around his neck. The group collectively turned back to the play, and Tristan froze as he saw Ravon looking at him. He had rematerialized in the booth next to Silas's. Clint had missed seeing him by only a few seconds. Tristan began reaching for his gun when Ravon pointed at the wall, separating his booth from Silas's. An instant later, he melted away and rematerialized in Silas's booth, back behind his entourage of guests. Tristan froze as he watched Ravon pull out a pistol and aim it at the back of the man's head closest to him. The angle of the shot had no chance of hitting Silas by accident. "You bastard," Tristan said as he pulled his gun from his holster. In that same moment, Ravon pulled the trigger. A flash lit the booth, and a second later, the boom thundered throughout the opera house. Ravon melted away before anyone caught a glimpse of him, and Tristan aimed his gun and fired at Silas. The wind began swirling around the opera hall like a tornado, and several women screamed, realizing that someone was actually shooting in the concert hall. 3 bullets leapt from Tristan's gun as he fired 3 shots in quick succession. But he was too late. Silas had his windshield up, and the bullets deflected from him, 2 of them hitting 2 more members of his entourage. Silas turned and stared right at Tristan. "Oh shit," Tristan said as he realized that Silas probably thought all of the shots had been fired from him. He stood there for a second as the wind whipped his hair, and the patrons all screamed as they rushed out of the hall, trampling anyone that fell down. Tristan leveled his pistol at Silas. A blue glow enveloped the gun as a loud crack filled the air. Blue light flashed from the muzzle as the bullet exited the chamber. It traveled for a fraction of a second before it melted and then rematerialized right in front of Silas's face. The winds whipping around him caught the bullet, pulling it to the right as it traced a thin red line across his cheek. Silas put his hand to his face and looked right at Tristan. A smoldering hate burned in his cold eyes. "Oh shit!" Tristan yelled as he bolted through the door. Silas roared, and the winds tore through the hall, ripping chairs from their floorbolts and tossing them like rag dolls. A gust of wind caught Silas as he sailed through the air toward the door Tristan had run through. Clint heard a gunshot and stared ahead as a man materialized in the hall just outside of the balcony door. Reflexes took over as Clint pulled his gun and aimed it at the man in front of him. He pulled the trigger as the man melted away and he dove to his right. Half a second later, Ravon materialized behind where Clint had been standing and fired his gun into the now vacated space. Clint twisted in the air as he fell and fired another shot that went wild, but still struck Ravon in the arm just before he melted away again. Several shots rang out through the walls, and Clint could hear what could only be described as a hurricane erupting from the opera hall. He could only guess that Ravon had shown up and spoiled their carefully laid plans. How come, when my only option is to be tossed from a train, the plan goes off without a hitch, but when I don't have to do anything crazy, all hell breaks loose? Clint said, holstering his pistol and running toward the door to the balcony. Now they know why I like the crazy plans. They may be crazy, but they always work. He tore the door open and saw Silas tearing through the air like a bat out of hell. With a quick glance, he could see 3 men on the ground and 2 ducked behind chairs, cowering like little children. The remaining 3 all seemed to turn around at the same time and began drawing their weapons. "Gentlemen," Clint said, as he closed through the door like he was just a regular usher. As soon as the door clicked shut, Clint bolted to the next room and opened the door, exiting out onto the balcony. He could hear the men crashing into the hall and shouting something. Ducking to the side, he went to one knee and aimed at the door. It burst open, and Clint fired once into the man, barreling through the door, and then once through the wall to the side of the door where he thought they'd be coming through. The man in the room with him went limp and died almost immediately, but Clint could hear the other 2 groaning. He fired another shot and heard 2 loud thuds. Peeking into the hall, he saw that both his shots had gone through the wall and then through both remaining guards. "You see, crazy just works." Clint laughed as he reloaded the spent cartridges. He looked down at the ruined opera hall and shouted, "Ramza, if you can hear me, we need you," he yelled as bolted back down the hall toward the front foyer. Tristan stopped at the top of the staircase and could see the throng of people still pushing over each other, trying to get out of the building. Looking to the side, he could see Artemis trapped in the hall that led toward the ladies' room. The sea of bodies flowed forward, cutting her off. Tristan jumped onto the handrail and slid down the stairs, launching himself into the throng of bodies. He knocked down 6 people as he crashed to the ground. Just then, a whirlwind burst through the door that Tristan had just come through. "You tried to kill me. Do you know who I am?" Silas shouted as a gust of wind blew several people down, including Tristan. The rest of the guests moved past the hall, and Artemis drew her pistol, stepping out and gaining a clear shot. She emptied the cartridge, but the bullets went wild, splintering wood and hitting one of the innocent bystanders in the leg. He screamed, and his wife grabbed him, dragging him out. The other patrons around Tristan got to their feet and ran, leaving him alone. Silas turned on Artemis and launched her against the wall with a powerful blast of wind. She grunted, dropping her pistol as she hit the wall. Tristan leveled his gun to the side of Silas, and blue light streaked as he fired 2 shots. The bullets bled out of existence and moved back in inches from Silas. The first bullet was still carried, hitting him in the shoulder, but the second sailed past harmlessly. Silas screamed in pain and turned on Tristan, his eyes now glowing with a red heat. Wind pushed Tristan up against the wall, pinning him as Silas floated forward. Drops of blood whirled from Silas's bleeding shoulder, splattering around the room. Tristan yelled as he tried to move, but suddenly his gun began to grow hot. The metal burned him as he dropped it. Tristan could see that Silas was staring at the gun, his eyes still glowing, but the wind was still pinning him to the ground. The metal glowed hot with heat and ignited the rug on fire where it sat. Tristan turned his head as he heard someone screaming. He saw Achilles tear into the room gun in hand. "You murdered my parents," he shouted over and over as he unloaded the cylinder of his gun. 6 shots rang out and tore through the foyer, but Silas's windshield carried them harmlessly away as he turned to meet the new threat. "I killed your parents?" he asked questioningly. "You people are nothing but ants to me, bugs to be squashed at my whim and pleasure," he shouted. He floated up into the air, rising like a destroying angel, and slammed down a burst of crushing winds. Waves after wave of pressure beat down on Achilles. Debris that whirled through the air got caught in the stream and slammed over and over into the boy. Just then, Clint burst out of the door atop the other staircase and fired 2 shots at Silas. Again, his windshield deflected them harmlessly away. Silas turned, looking up, and roared, "How many vermin did you bring?" His eyes began to glow again, and Clint was suddenly hit with a burst of heat. He dove down the stairs, but Silas's gaze trailed after him. He roared again, and the room began spinning like a tornado. Just then, Ramza burst through the door that came in from the opera hall floor. He was carrying what looked like one of the bolted-down concert hall seats. The wind blew his beard up into his face, and he launched the chair with all his might. The wind caught it as it arced, changing its direction mid-flight. The angle of the throw shifted and sent the chair slamming into Silas, hitting him in the head. He fell like a stone to the floor and crashed into it head first, snapping his neck. The winds died almost immediately. "Bullseye!" Ramza shouted as he lifted his hands in the air and danced around, shaking his belly as the beads in his beard bounced in rhythm. "Holy shit!" Tristan exclaimed. "Did that really just happen?" Artemis asked in disbelief. Clint just started laughing. They all turned toward him and began laughing at themselves. A gem flashed into existence next to Silas. It was glowing orange, and Tristan snatched it up with his handkerchief, putting it in his pocket. "By Calais' beard, if a plan is crazy enough, we pull it off in spades." Clint laughed, but he stopped short when he saw a look of horror on Artemis's face. Artemis darted over to where Achilles lay on the ground. "I need some help over here," she shouted as she checked over the boy. There was a large chunk of wood sticking through the boy's stomach and out his back. Achilles couldn't see right. He thought that a beautiful woman was staring at him, but every time he moved, pain blossomed in his stomach. The world was fuzzy as another man came over and started checking him roughly. "He can't recover from a stomach wound like that," Artemis said, voice shaking. "He saved my life," Tristan said. "Silas would have crushed me or cooked me to death if he hadn't showed up." "We can't take him with us. He's one of Switch's men," Clint said. "How can you be so cold?" Artemis asked, venom dripping in her voice. I'm just being practical. Switch was only helping us cause he wants to bond the gem. The boy will tell him we have it if we save him." Please, help me," Achilles stammered, coughing up blood. "Clint," Artemis said, staring at him. The rest of her words fuzzed out of existence as Achilles' vision went dark. What seemed like an eternity passed before pain brought Achilles' vision back into sharp focus. Artemis held the chunk of splintered wood that moments earlier had been in his stomach. Blood began pouring out of the wound, and Achilles thought he could hear a ringing sound. Tears streaked down Artemis's face as she tried to apply pressure to the wound. Clint put a hand on her shoulder, and she sat back on her heels and looked away. "Sorry, kid. I wish I didn't have to do this," Clint said as he leveled his pistol at the boy's chest. "Wait." Achilles started as 2 shots erupted from Clint's gun. Achilles could feel 2 sharp jets of fire pass through his chest. He tried to breathe in, but his world just faded to black.